Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on a beautiful movie. Whenever I have people as accomplished as either of you, I actually love to start at the beginning and ask, what was your first job in this industry? You know, before you were a filmmaker, were you a PA? Or when was the first time you felt you could call yourself an actor, your first acting role?
Well, I grew up making skate videos, so just kind of skating around with my friends, and then we got into doing dumb stunts. Like we would set up, like there was this one really special clip that I had where I jumped off of a mini trampoline into a dumpster, and but you know, in doing those things, which really is essentially what Jackass was, which it felt like that was so attainable to like a young teenage kid who was, you know, just wanted to do everything DIY. So that was like something I felt like we could do, and I always had an affinity for a camera. So I mean, my first start, I guess, would be like filming skate videos, and yeah.
And how old were you?
I was probably like 12 years old, running around with a big camera. Like, like my first camera was the one with like the actual size of the VHS tapes that went in it, and then I went to a pawn shop and traded a bunch of like clothes and other little knickknacks and got the one with like the mini DV tape, and then it went from mini DV to digital. Yeah, I mean, I've been filming my whole life, to be honest.
And you still have that do-it-yourself spirit. That's what I love.
Yeah, totally.
Tim, for you?
When I was in high school, I had a party, and my mom found out and grounded me, and I watched Casablanca because I couldn't go out, so all I could do was rent movies. And I watched Casablanca, and I was like, wow, and it just turned me around completely. My first job in the industry, I was a PA.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I was a PA for commercials because the only person I knew was a commercial producer, and I did a Vagistat commercial where I drove the garbage truck. And on the highway back from set, I didn't close the truck the right way, and the garbage was falling out all over the road. So I knew I had to be a director and not a PA. And so I went on making short films and went from there.
And I bet you're always nice to your PAs. Because you've been there.
I'm totally nice to my PAs, because I think the PAs are like the heart of the entire production, you know, and I don't mean that they, you know, doing menial jobs. I mean their spirit. If their spirit is high, then everyone's spirit is high, and that's the important part. If your crew believes it's their movie too, it's their movie, and they try that much harder. And I do want to just take a second. There is crew in the audience tonight. I just want to thank them.
Well, again, congratulations on a great movie. I know you previously worked together on The Last Son, in which Colson played a very different role. That was like a 19th century bank robber. I'm kind of curious, at what point did you start discussing what would become Taurus?
Well, we were smoking a joint in Tim's in Tim's cabin, except there wasn't a cabin. We lived in this town that's owned by, I guess, like Marlboro, and they built this ranch in the middle of Montana, and the houses that we lived in, like I lived in the barber shop, and he lived in like the bank. Like it was like there was like a set, and then in the back of the set was a bed and a bathroom and stuff. And so I lived in the barber shop was my hood, and he was in the bank, and I walked over to the bank, and we chilled one day, and we were just talking and kind of getting to know each other on a deeper level outside of work, and because we kind of had like similar taste to a lot of things, and we were like finding a lot of commonalities, and then we hung out, and then that night he was like, if you ever make a movie about your life, you should let me direct it.
That is not how I sounded. That's what I said, but I wasn't like, you know, he plays a bank robber in that movie, but you know, we immediately kind of understood that it wasn't just a Billy the Kid, but it was an abandoned child. Mm-hmm. And he was more than excited to play both those roles, the kind of slick cowboy who twists it, who like spins his gun, and also the kid who's abandoned, who doesn't know why his mother doesn't love him. And that really excited me because it made me realize he wants to go deeper.
Yeah.
And that's why I knew, like, to go as deep as possible, a movie about a musician who's, basically, an alter ego of him would take a lot of courage, but also it was clear that he wanted to do it. So I just felt like not presumptuous being able to say, like, listen, if you want to do a movie about yourself, like, I want to do it. And I went home and wrote a script in 3 weeks and sent it to him.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was always the movie I wanted to do my whole career as an actor. I always I was lacking confidence every movie that was coming out that I was in being like, I really want everyone to see it, because I felt like I wasn't either, like, first half of my career in that department, it was like I wasn't focused enough, and it was, even though I was working really hard to get the roles, like I was never getting yeses. I was always getting no'd in auditions and continuously pushing and thinking of crazy ways to get the role, which would end up getting me the role. But the actual, like, I wasn't, I don't know, there's this one scene in Glengarry Ross where Alec Baldwin has this 5-minute monologue, and that's his only appearance in the movie, and he really just makes, like, he's the most memorable character just in that 5 minutes. And I never felt like the 5 minutes or 10-minute screen times that I was getting in these movies, like I was having that moment. And so I was really looking for a director to put me in the film, like in a whole film, and really let me have a character arc. And this was that first movie for me that felt like I finally got a moment to act. But ironically, the character is essentially me, so I don't know who else.
Yes and no.
I want to make a point,
Yes.
just say, this is a work of fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a work of fiction because I wrote it, and it's fictional. But more importantly, like, I don't think people understand the idea that it's performance. He's not doing cocaine in those scenes. He's not, that's not his real assistant. There's a craft service table right outside the camera. This is all an incredible performance, but it's at the same time as close to a documentary as you're going to get in this kind of level. So it's a really multi-layered performance that I think, people compare this movie to Last Days by Gus Van Sant, which we watched and I love, but this movie isn't like that movie because of various reasons, one of which is Kurt Cobain didn't play Kurt Cobain.
Right.
And I think it's it's a testament to Colson's nerve, but also his ability to be authentic at the same time doing sheer performance. And that's why one of the reasons the movie is so special, because it's hard to categorize.
And any actor I've spoken to has said it is harder to play something that's closer to yourself than to just play a character, because it is so exposing. And did you ever hesitate? Did that thought ever enter your mind that this was going to be a tough role for you?
Yeah, every time, like, I tried to get Tim to cut me yelling at my assistant scene out. Moments like that, where I was like, oh, I'm just being seen in this way, or it's too close to home, or what if people think this about me? And then I was so glad that he ended up just, keeping it, because the hardest part is to be that vulnerable. Otherwise, it still feels like music propaganda, which is what they do with all these artists, which is like clean them up and present them to the world in perfection. And that like kind of rubs me the wrong way. Even if I see myself doing that, I'm kind of like, that's just not. I always talk about that when I'm like on a red carpet and I'll crack a smile or something like that, and I'm like, ew, I don't feel like smiling at all right now, but I'm doing this because I don't want to seem ungrateful to the people watching that are like, oh, we got you here. Because my fans are really the reason why I'm at where I'm at. I'm not this like extremely, I definitely wasn't earlier on my career, like this marketable, superstar that makes #1 pop songs. I was never, I wasn't an easy pitch. It was really the people who like kept lifting me up to get to this point to where people, like, I couldn't be ignored by the industry because the people felt me. So yeah, to be vulnerable to that extent where you can be looked at like an asshole or but beyond flawed, like it's especially like his relationship with the women in his life is like he scares everybody away because he doesn't feel worth being loved, because whoever was supposed to love him, like that primal carnal feeling where you're like, oh, my parents, whoever was supposed to love him didn't love him, so he immediately just rejects everybody. And that rejection comes in like anger, and he can, be scary, and that's like rough to show yourself in that way.
Oh, yeah.
But, I'm glad I did it.
And rough to do those scenes, because when you're acting, your body doesn't always know the difference. You're still putting it through traumatic events. I mean, how do you sort of take care of yourself when you know that you have these difficult days? Do you take your work home with you, or do you have a way to sort of decompress at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think my girl was having a rough month that time we were shooting that movie. But no, I think I'm just kind of like that a lot. I don't know. I've just been smoking a lot of cigarettes. That's been like just kind of giving my hands something to do and my mind something to do anytime I'm too frantic or anxious. And I have this fear of like these things not being here tomorrow. Like, oh, what if this is my last film festival I'm at? What if this is, I feel like everything's always fleeting or running away. So I've just been trying to love myself for myself and not like any of the things that I put all my focus on. Like, because at the end of the day, like, I live obsessing over the creation that is Machine Gun Kelly, but like I gotta wake myself up at some point too,
Tim, I'm thinking you obviously have an expert in this world and an expert in this character at your disposal. So I know you wrote a draft very quickly, but then how much collaboration was there between the two of you and, sort of getting that final script and bringing this character to life? Well,
I mean, I think I think Colson would agree that we're an odd couple, but there's some kind of link that we have. Yeah. So the things that I wrote in the script, which I didn't know about his life, had happened to him. He had experienced. So we had this really incredible connection where he read the script. He was like, "This is me," and so we were off to a good start. But what Colson brought to it. First of all, the most important thing a writer-director does is the director has to divorce the writer as soon as the first draft is accepted, and the producers accept what you're doing and are behind you, which we had supportive producers and financiers who allowed it to evolve during production. But the most important thing is that I wanted authenticity. He demanded authenticity. So there were scenes that, especially the music stuff, where I wrote what I thought would work, and he said, no, this is really important, we have to do it this way. And I'm not married to the writing, so I'm like, let's do it this way, let me learn. So the next scene I could be like, oh, if we're doing this, then maybe this will work or that will work. So it was a very collaborative process, because we were both open to it. We were both open to each other's ideas. And I think that's the most important thing. You don't bring a script to life. You make a film. It's two different things. And if everybody's on board with that, including your crew, including your producers, but most importantly, your most close creative collaborator, which was Colson, the film grew. Yeah. And that's what's really exciting to me, because it's organic. The performance, the film feels like it's growing rather than being constructed.
The whole film is scored off of just the chords that I play in the studio in that scene when he's making his last song. Mm. So Tim let the camera roll for like 30 minutes, and I just played the chords. Like I forgot the camera was there, and I was just kind of making this sample of the Blue Foundation song Eyes on Fire, and because I was like, oh, this would be a cool song to use for this film, and that became the whole script. So like it's wild to rewatch and think like, wow, that was such a it's crazy that 4 chords just power a whole hour and a half. And then I really like how in the studio, because every music movie I always see, like, they're always like, it's these overthought studio moments. And while I like understand that in Elvis's day, probably there was like a lot of like people like adjusting all these things and like moving them. This movie was like, they were recording a lot of the times just in the room with each other, or like we were using voice memo to record guitars, because a lot of times that is just how this generation is doing it. And I think it's a cool time capsule for our generation's way of making music, you know, because it is a little like, I'm tired of seeing the same studio scene in music movies. It's acceptable when it was that, but it's like it's a new time, and so it's actually cool how even the choice. I brought this to Tim when we, you know, most like rock star movies, like there's like the drug, like, and it's like it's always like cocaine or pills, and while both those were still present in this one, there was he was doing whippets, and like that was like something that I'm glad he trusted me with, because it also, you know, kind of added a more now feeling too, because it was just something that separates it from maybe like the 90s or the 80s. And I mean, but they were probably doing it back then either, but I wasn't alive to know. So
yeah, but I think it's also like the whippets were, you know, I think for me, he was like, in the script, he was doing bumps or something. But the whippets come across as almost sadder.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what it brings. So when you go and you have that excursion into the stand-up comedy part, and then you come back and he's just passed out there on whippets, it's almost just, it's worse. It's right. Pathetic. And it sets you up in a way that I think just doing a couple of lines wouldn't have done. But you know, that's Colson coming to me saying he should do whippets, and I'm saying, all right, let's do whippets, let's do it.
Well, that's such great authenticity. You have like somebody right
very authentic
there.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, but it's you don't. If an actor had been in this role, then they wouldn't have brought that to me. They would have been like, okay, that's in the script, or they would have maybe had ideas. But like, you have this musician, this rock star, this person who's living this life. It's up to me to kind of get out of the way. Like a lot of directing is coming up with an idea, talking about that idea, setting the stage, and then getting the fuck out of the way. Right. And you know, directing is not about micromanaging. It's about it's about empowering. And
to that point, remember when you asked for like a great voice, and I was like, oh, my friend has this great voice, and Naomi is a friend of mine, and she ends up being in the. Are you here?
Yeah, Naomi.
Yes.
Oh.
Hi.
Woo.
She's incredible.
But that was like Tim just having just a real set of balls to really trust like the suggestions being.
Well, I loved how this movie captured the creative process, because like you said, you see the same scenes in movies where, like, you know, there's a studio executive or a music guy who says, you know, we need one great song, and then
that was totally in the script too.
Was it really?
Yeah, what's really interesting is that was in the script, and Scoot McNairy was cast as the guy, and he was like, great, and he came on set, and Colson was just hated the scene so much, he was so mean to Scoot. To the point where it was like, he was in character, but it was also just being like, he didn't want this scene. He didn't want this scene. And so finally I was just like, all right, well, what can this guy be if he's not he was supposed to be the producer. And I was like, can't he be the studio executive? He's obviously your enemy right now. Can he be your enemy in the movie? And Colson was basically, yes. I went and wrote some pages, and that's where we get the outdoor scene where it really works. And it's more, again, it's more authentic.
I love that you called BS on that scene, because we've seen it a million times. Yeah. Exactly. I really want to touch on the cast really quick, because this is such a fantastic ensemble, and you actually cited my favorite scene where he's yelling at his assistant, and I just think that Maddie Hassan, she's phenomenal. Where did you find her? And was there, this may sound strange, but was there like a chemistry read between the two of them?
No, it was hard to, you know, when Colson's with you, he's completely with you, but he has a rather busy schedule. So when he's not with you, it's sometimes hard to get a chemistry read. But we had some a lot of actresses auditioning, including actresses that you've seen a lot in movies and TV, who really wanted the role because the movie is really about their relationship. And Maddie, she sent in a tape, and she was just exactly who I thought the assistant was. And she said the thing that got me perfectly was there's a line in that during the fight where it says, "God, I hate you," and a lot of the actors were reading it like, "God, I hate you," and she said it as one word, "God, I hate you," and I was like, she knows what I'm talking about. And then she came on, and she's just such a genuine person, and like we're all in. Like all I want to do is go all the way. Obviously, Colson goes all the way. And she was there to meet us, and that's what she wanted to do more than anything. So she's a real fantastic actor. And I got to be honest, like Scoot then said, "Okay, I'm not the producer, I'm the studio executive, and these are my new lines," and he got it. So, and I do want to shout out Naomi Wild, who's here and whose voice is only part of her. I mean, I don't know how much acting experience she had, but we got in the car and I was like, "Okay, you got to cry. We got to see that tear." And I can't do that on camera. Like I could never do that. And she cries every time I see that scene. It makes me want to cry for her. And so the talent was not just with Maddie, not with Scoot or Ruby, but Naomi is a huge part of the picture and a huge part of the emotional part of the picture.
I can't do any of that. It's actually almost unfair that the two of you are so good at so many things. Is there something you're not good at that would make me feel a little bit better about myself?
No.
Oh, I knew it.
I suck at hacky sack. I tried a lot. Really? Yeah. I can't get that goddamn beanbag to just stay in one place. It's so annoying.
I'm excellent at hacky sack.
I knew it. I do want to remind people that this movie will be in theaters and on demand November 18th. Please spread the word. Because it's such a special film. I just want everyone to know. I want to thank you for being a great audience. Thank you both so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm in the studio trying to get these 2 songs from the film to release those in time for the movie, so maybe we'll have some new music soon.